Hello, let me welcome you to our final talk about full stack components by Kenzie Dodds. And for someone who meet Kenzie Dodds first time at the conferences, let me do a quick introduction. Kenzie Dodds is software engineer and educator. He is creator of Epic Web Dev, Epic React Dev, and TestedJavaScript.com. He is instructor on Egghead.io and from TED Master. So let's switch to the topic and the next talk.
Hello, JSFW Days Europe. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but I'm super excited to join you virtually for this wonderful conference. It's a wonderful thing that people are doing for Ukraine, and I'm just super excited to be a part of this. I am going to talk with you about full stack components, and I'm really excited to talk about this. This is something that I would have just loved my time at PayPal, or even pretty much my entire time as a web developer. This idea of being able to build everything full stack, even to the component level. Amazing, amazing. So co-location, taking that to the next level. My name is Kenzie Dodds. I've got a link to all the slides and all the other links that are in here right there on my GitHub. I'm coming at you from Utah. I have a wife and a daughter and 3 sons and a dog. And then here's a bunch of other stuff about me. The one I want to call out specifically is Epic Web Dev. That's what I'm working on right now. And it's basically, I'm trying to take everything that I know about web development and stick it onto this platform. So I'm building it all in public, and so you can follow along with me. And if you go to Epic Web Dev and give me your email, then I will bring you along for the ride. And it'll be quite a fun one as well. This talk is a demonstration of components that include both UI and server-side code in a single file. And there's plenty of code that we're going to be looking at, and hopefully it won't be boring. That's the hope. But if you decide that you would rather do something else, I won't be offended. Just don't tell me. We are going to be talking about Remix here. Remix has been just an enormous productivity booster for me. For about 10 months, I was the director of developer experience at Remix before I decided I just really wanted to focus on Epic Web. And so now I'm full-time on that. But Remix has just been phenomenal for me. I rebuilt my website in Remix and haven't looked back for the last 2 years that Remix has kind of been around. So super excited about that. Let's just jump in. So I want to talk about the marriage of backend and UI. So this is what it feels like to build a web page in 2022 with Remix. So you've got your route module. This will be a file inside of your app directory under routes, and whatever you name the file is going to determine where that file appears as far as the URL is concerned. So it's conventional routing. So you have a loader. This is for loading the data, and this only runs on the server. So you can talk to databases, you can use third-party APIs, you could talk to like 30 other services, bring it all together and do some calculations, and then whatever you send back in this return is what is going to be received into your UI. And this JSON here is a utility function, just a helper for creating a response. And so we get this request object that is a web fetch request object, and then we can use that to authenticate the user or whatever, and then we send back this response that will be fed into our UI. And so that ends up inside of this use loader data that will be as part of our UI. And I'm saying UI instead of client because Remix is fully server rendered. So this will run both on the server as well as on the client for transitions, turning Remix into what I am calling like our next generation or the next transition of how we build web apps. I call it a progressively enhanced single page app. So it feels like a single page app for the user, but it loads like way faster. There are fewer spinners and everything. And the end result is a really, really simple mental model for us. So this projects component is just UI is what I'm calling it. It's not just client code. Okay, so we say use loader data, we pass it the type of loader, and now we get type help here, which is really nice, all in the same file. And then we can use this use transition hook from Remix to handle pending states. And we'll actually do that a little bit in a demo that I've got for you. So we can determine whether we're currently in a busy state and will be in that state when this form is submitted. So in Remix here, we've got our projects, we render out those, but we're also rendering this form. Remix has a form component for doing mutations. And when a mutation happens on the web, just the way that regular forms work, the user types in whatever they want to, they hit submit, and the web will serialize that form and send a request to the action, whatever is specified here as the action, path to endpoint or whatever, that's going to handle that. And if you don't have one, then it will just take the current URL, which in our case is this file. And so that action will end up inside of our action function, which, like loader, only runs on the server. So you can talk to databases and other services and use private keys without worry and whatever. And we get whatever the user submitted out of the form data. This is, again, all spec stuff. This is just the web fetch API. And use that to create our project or whatever we want to do, and then send a redirect so the user will go to that new project's page or whatever. So this is already really awesome. The ability to have a page that has its data loading requirements and its data mutation requirements right alongside the UI. Really, really nice developer experience, really great user experience, because Remix is able to optimize a lot of things, make the app really, really fast, and it's effortless for us. But this only really applies to like full-on pages and stuff. But what if I had a UI component that was used in like multiple pages? I've got them all over the place. A good example of this is the Twitter like button. That's like, it's in many, many places on an individual page. Or in our demo's case, what I've got is this autocomplete or this combo box search experience where the user can type in a search. We make a request to go find the matching customers, and then we show that list of matching customers. So that's the demo that we're going to show you here. And what would be really nice is if we could get this kind of experience where the backend code lives right alongside the UI code, so that we can share types really easily. We can just have that benefit of the co-location, so we're not opening a bunch of different files and trying to follow code paths. There's a lot of benefits to having this type of co-location. And so that is what our demo is going to be all about. So I'm going to open up this file and this file. So we've got our customers. We're going to finish the owl. So this is going to be for our combo box that we're going to build together. And then this is our route that is going to render that combo box. So let's actually pull up that UI. And I'm going to actually close all of this other stuff just to keep things nice and neat. And I think I closed the wrong thing. There we go. And now I'm going to run our example app here. So here we are on the invoices page. If I want to create an invoice, that's where this is going to go. Our customer combo box goes right here. So we need to have some combo box that has its backend code associated to it. Okay, so here's something really neat. Where this file lives, this is our app. We have the package JSON will live inside of here. There's our Remix config, all of that. Inside of this directory, we've got an app directory. And this is where most of our source code is going to live for our app, is inside of the app directory. And then the routes directory is where all the routes for our application are going to be, the route modules. And in Remix, the route modules are, they export loader, action, there's also links and meta, and should revalidate or should reload. That's actually unstable. Probably shouldn't even mention that. You don't actually use that one very often. Error boundaries, different things like that. And so if most of our route modules are going to have a default export, which is going to be the UI. But if you don't have a default export, then Remix will take this route for anybody who's hitting that URL and treat it like just an API route. And so if I say export async, here, a function, there we go, called loader, and then return JSON, we'll pull that from Remix run. That should actually come from Node. I'm not sure why that didn't autocomplete properly. But we'll return JSON that says hello world, and then save that. Now I can go to the URL for this particular route, and I'm going to get JSON back. So where I put this is under routes, resources, customers. So I'm going to go to /resources/customers, but it actually doesn't have to be called resources. It can be called whatever we want it to. It can go anywhere inside of the route directory. It just made sense for me because we call these resource routes. So if I go to /resources/customers, then I'm going to get JSON back. And so whereas like our other routes have default exports, and so there's going to be nested routing and all sorts of really awesome things. If you don't have that default export, then we're just going to get an API route at that URL. This is important to understand for some of the stuff that we're going to do. So here's the really neat thing about this is that I can actually also export a bunch of other things here that Remix doesn't know or care anything about. And so in particular, I'm going to actually, oh, you know what? I shouldn't have. If we go to 06 MD, I need my notes. I'm going to copy this because none of you want to watch me write JSX, I promise. So we're going to copy a bunch of this stuff that's not really relevant for what I want to talk about specifically. And I need to bring in a bunch of imports, which I didn't really think about when I did this. So let's bring in that. We're going to have a customer type, but we'll leave that blank for now. Going to bring in use combo box from downshift. Our customers, this is, implicit any. We don't really care about that for right now. We'll fix that later. Our label text is a handy dandy component. This CLSX is a handy utility for combining class names and things. This is going to complain about customers being implicit any. That's fine. And then we'll use that spinner a little bit later. So with this, now we're just exporting a component. Remix doesn't know or care anything about this. We still don't have a default export. And so Remix is just like, oh, okay, so this is still just an API route. So let's just, to be sure, hello world 2. So we're going to Mars, I guess. But yeah, so this is still working, but now we're also exporting this customer combo box. And so what that means is my new.tsx, the route that, if we go back, the route that's rendering this bit, that can actually import that and use this component. So let's go down here and just grab the customer combo box, and it's going to accept an error message eventually. So we'll have it accept that. Actually, I think it does already. Yep. So we accept an error message. And now if I go to customers new, there is our combo box. Now it doesn't do anything yet because we haven't done that bit. I want to show you that, but there's nothing stopping us from being able to have our component that's going to use the backend resource route within the resource route itself. And so we can have this co-location. We have the UI piece that is associated to the backend piece, to this API route. This is really cool. So now we're going to implement our loader. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to take my request object. We're going to get these loader args from Remix Run Node, and I'm going to authenticate my user because this is a protected data. Like we don't want our users or random people to be able to access our customers. So we're going to await require user with this request to authenticate this particular resource route, because people can hit this resource route directly. So if I come here to localhost 8001 and go resources customers, you'll see I get hello world there. But if I go to an incognito, I'm going to get redirected to the login screen. And so, yeah, we've just protected this particular route. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to be able to have a query that says, allows me to query specific customers. So that is going to be on the request URL. So we're going to say URL equals new URL, request URL, and then we can get our query from URL search params.get query. And then this is going to either be a string or a null. So let's actually just say or string. So now it's 100%, that's going to be a string. And then we'll say search customers. We've got just this handy little thing. We're using SQLite and Prisma. That's not really relevant for what you're doing. You could be calling another server somewhere with fetch. We have fetch on the server with Remix. It's polyfilled for us. And so we could be doing that, whatever. That's all implementation detail stuff. So it's just going to take our query. We'll get our customers and we'll await that because that's a promise. And then our JSON will just return customers. So now I can come over here and we've got our matching customers. If I just do S, then we're going to get a couple more. And again, this is all protected too. So that's neat. So now we've got our API route. API route is done. We are ready to hit this API route with our UI. So how is this going to work? Let's just review this customer combo box really quick. So we've got our list of customers right here. That needs to be populated with whatever customers come back from the API. We have this use combo box that this is coming from Downshift. Downshift is a library I wrote many years ago, and it is still kicking, still great, accessible, all this wonderful stuff. And it has this API for responding to input value changes. And so when the input value changes, we can make a fetch request. And so that's what we're going to do in there. And then we'll talk about doing pending states and stuff later. But then down here, we're just rendering all of the combo box stuff that Downshift is going to take care of for us. So, and then I guess ultimately it's also useful to know that the customers that we get from the API are going to be rendered in this list. Okay, so with all of that, the first thing that we're going to do is set up what is called a Remix fetcher. So a fetcher in Remix, so one important aspect of Remix is that it manages all of the network for you. So from like page transitions to like calling loaders of routes, as well as these non-navigation fetches like what we're doing here. So I'm going to have my customer fetcher from use fetcher. This is coming from Remix run React. And use fetcher actually accepts the type of data that is going to be coming back. And I'm using TypeScript. I love TypeScript. It's amazing. And so we're going to pass a generic to tell it what the type is that is going to come back from the API calls that we're going to be making with this. So we're going to say serialize because we are going across a network. So we're going to say serialize from type of, you got to spell it right. It doesn't work if you don't. Loader. And this serialize from is a utility that also comes from Remix to serialize the customers that are coming across the network, because like things like dates and stuff are not going to be remain dates as they go through the network. They're going to turn into strings. There's actually a pull request right now to do this automatically. So in the future, you should be able to just put type of loader, which is actually what you can do in your use loader data and use action data right now. But we're just going to serialize it ourselves. And now we have our customer fetcher. This is going to allow us to make a fetch request. So down in our on input value change, we're going to say customer fetcher. And we have a couple of things we can do on here. One is actually a component. We can use a form. And if we were doing something that required a submit button, then we would use the form. But we're doing an imperative get request. It's something that happens when the user does something else, specifically when they type in the input. And so for that reason, we're not going to be using the form. Instead, we are either going to call load or we're going to call submit. Load it just allows you to do a get request to our URL. I prefer to do submit, and we can still set the method to get because it will actually serialize our query params for us. So we're going to say submit. And there, yep, that is actually quite all right, except this is complaining because our changes.input value, so that the change that just happened, the input value could be undefined, and we're not allowed to send undefined. So we'll just do or an empty string. And then as the second argument, we're going to say method is get. And then I think actually, oh, right. And we also need the action. So this is where this get request should be sent. And for us, it's just going to be resources/customers. It's the resource route that we're currently working in that this particular loader is going to respond to. So that's it. That we've now connected our backend to this UI. So the last thing that we need to do is have our customers be assigned to whatever comes back from this customer fetcher. But remember, we're not actually triggering the fetch until after the user starts typing. So this fetcher might not actually have data yet. So we're going to say customer fetcher.data. But if that doesn't exist, and actually we're sending back customers, so we'll say .customers. But if that doesn't exist yet, then we'll just go with the empty array of customers. Okay, and then the last thing to make TypeScript not so angry about things, we're actually going to add a type called customer. And that's exactly right. Thanks, Copilot. So our customers, which is serialized from the loader, so whatever is returned by the loader is what this, this customer fetcher type is going to be. We're just going to grab this type. That's what we're doing when we say customers or type of customers at number. It'll just be that type. So that's what a customer is. And now we can say that our selected customer can be null, undefined, or customer. And now down here, everything else is happy. It's no longer yelling at us because we have implicit any's. And that's it. I'm done. We are ready to say Santa Monica and proceed with filling out this form. So that's pretty sweet. I'm actually pretty happy with that. And so I'll just quickly review. What we did here was we started with an empty file. We added a loader, an export async function loader. And as soon as we did that, that turned our this particular route of /resources/customers into a resource route where it responds to, it sends the response that you send right here. So whatever that is, we could send JSON, but we could also send an image. We could send a video. We could send a PDF. We could send CSS. You like dynamically generate CSS. People are doing all sorts of really interesting things with resource routes. You could dynamically generate JS. Actually, and a use case for that would be polyfill.io, which is a pretty cool service for automatically polyfilling or creating a polyfill JavaScript file based on what the user's browser supports, which is kind of cool. You could totally do that inside of a loader. So in our loader, we respond with whatever we want. In our case, we're going to respond with JSON because we're making a JSON API. And then we export a component that can be used to integrate or that specifically integrates with this resource route. And what's really cool about this is you could do a component. You could do just today, I actually had a utility function that I stuck in there. So whatever you want, you can stick as an export to this, and then you can use that everywhere. And nothing needs to actually know the implementation of how this loader and this component work together in tandem, which is cool. So just for the fun of it, because I do have a little bit of extra time, I'm going to add some pending state here. So we do have a spinner. There we go. And we need show spinner. So how do we know when we should be showing the spinner? So that's one of the other things that our customer fetcher exposes to us is the current pending state. So we can say show spinner equals, nice try, Copilot. So customer fetcher has a state, and if it can be equal to three things. It can either be idle, loading, or submitting. So submitting is we're making a request. And if there was a mutation there, then a revalidation is going to happen. So then we get loading of the new data. In our case, I think we're just fine saying if it's not idle, it's probably pending. So we're just going to say not idle. So if we should show the spinner if the current state of the fetcher is not idle. So let's take a look at that. And we'll say sent, and you'll see like it flashes right there. So let's actually slow down to a slow 3G so we can actually see that spinner show up. So ta-da, the spinner shows up. But I was actually bothered by this flashing, right? Like, doesn't that bother you whenever you see a flash of loading state? So just for the fun of it, this has nothing to do with Remix, but it's a simple solution is we can use this handy use spin delay hook that comes from the spin delay module. And we'll pass in the Boolean that we want to have delayed. And then I'm actually going to say, I want this to be 150 milliseconds before I show anything. And if I show anything, then it should be around for at least a min duration of, let's say 300 milliseconds, maybe 350. So now this is a Boolean that will not be set to true until after 150 milliseconds after this is true. And if it is set to true, then it will remain true for at least 350 milliseconds. That's the idea. That's what this use spin delay is doing. And so now, when things are really fast, we no longer get that flash of loading state. But if things are really slow, then we get the nice loading state there, which I think is quite nice. And that's it. The world is your oyster here. Like you can do all sorts of things, co-locating the UI or utility function or whatever with the backend. We get full stack components now. And I just think that is so rad. So let me wrap up with the last couple of things. In review, Remix allows us to create resource routes by simply having a route with no default export. If you have a default export, that's your UI for this particular route. It's going to apply it with nested routing and all that stuff, which you can learn about later if you've never used Remix before. It's quite nice. But if you have no default export, that's just going to be whatever your loader returns. You can actually also have a resource route that just exports an action, and that will handle basically all non-GET requests is what that will handle. And we can export anything else we'd like. So Remix will just ignore the rest of it. And so we can export components and utility functions, whatever, like you could do a hook in there, whatever, that integrate with the resource route directly. And that code co-location just makes it so much easier to maintain and to build. Like a productivity aspect is really nice too. The last thing I want to say is y'all are super inspiring. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you for a great presentation. It was really inspiring. Yeah, I hope a lot of people after a conference would like to try to use Remix. And okay, let's wait for a question from audience, but I have some at the moment. And the first one will be, what do you like the most about Remix?
Ooh, I'm not sure how, which of all these things do I like the most? I think probably the mutations story. We spend probably like half of our time, maybe 30 to 50% of the time that we spend working on web applications, we're dealing with application state management. And that is, it would sure be nice if we didn't have to do that. People who've been doing web development for a long time remember the days of multi-page apps, and some people are still working on multi-page apps, and how simple that architecture is. And Remix brings that simple architecture into the modern age with modern UX that our users are expecting of our apps. And so we can have the really capable single-page app type experience with the really simple multi-page app experience. And a lot of that is because of the way that Remix manages mutations.
Yeah, that's nice. And another question, can we call Remix server-side rendering framework or library maybe?
Yeah. It's best classified as a server-side rendered framework. And you can do client rendering with it, so client-only code for sure. But the best user experience really comes from server rendering. And so, yeah, I would call it server-rendered framework.
In that case, I would ask you, do you have any recommendation for what types of projects we can use Remix and which will be the right solutions?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So Remix can get you the best user experience out of anything else that I can think of for like 99% of use cases on the web. And I can't think of much else that would serve you any better for other use for anything that's on the web. There are some shortcomings that Remix has that are being worked out right now. One interesting one is because Remix has such a focus on the server, from like loader and action only run on the server, Your UI code runs on the server and then is hydrated on the client. Because of this, hot module replacement is a really difficult problem. It's not just technically difficult, but it's actually like, what do you want to have happen when you change server code? Do you want to have like your loaders recalled, or like you change your action? So do you want to call that action again? Like there are a lot of unanswered questions. So hot module replacement is not, or fast refresh, or whatever you want to call that, is not supported yet in Remix, but people are definitely working on that problem. And so if that's really important to you in your workflow, then Remix, it's good to know that's not supported by Remix. Yeah, I just tell people that Remix is well suited for any user experience you want to build for the web, and it gives an excellent developer experience as well. So I use it for everything.
And the next question from audience, maybe it's too obvious, but why not Next.js? I expected this question. Or which one is better for which use cases?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is, there's a lot more nuance than we have time to cover in just our discussion here. And so when I was at Remix, we worked on rebuilding one of Next.js's demos so that we could do a more real world comparison. And we elaborated on everything in a blog post. So if you go to remix.run/blog, you'll find a Next versus Remix blog post there that goes into great detail on the architectural differences for this app in particular, as well as the user experience differences. And to sum it up, Remix is better in every way. And Next.js is adopting a lot of the things that Remix has pioneered in the space. So that tells you that Next.js agrees that there are a lot of really cool things that Remix brings to the table. But it's non-trivial, and Next is working on it, but it's they're kind of taking a very different approach with server components, which are unproven and unstable currently. So I personally prefer using stable APIs, and Remix is able to provide a really awesome user experience without relying on unstable APIs. And then the other thing in that blog post, as just an example, with what you get out of Next today, the demo was an e-commerce site using Shopify, and Next.js's Shopify integration was like I think it was almost 8,000 lines of code, and Remix's was just over 600. So that should give you an idea of what the developer experience is like as well. So it was faster, better user experience, less content layout shift, and the developer experience was better. So if you're interested, I would definitely recommend diving into that blog post. Next.js is definitely trying to adopt a lot of the things that Remix does, but even the things that they have proposed don't cover everything. Like they still don't have anything for mutations, which is a big surprise to me. But yeah, you can use Remix now and get all of those things, or I guess you could wait and see what Next.js has to offer in the future.
Yeah, thanks. And another questions, can we use Remix plus some other frameworks like Vue.js or Angular or anything else? Or maybe Vanilla.js if someone liked it.
Yeah, totally. There are reasons to not like React for sure, just like anything else. And so there are certainly people who are not super jazzed about using a framework that supports only React. And so Remix started as a React framework because it's really just an evolution of React Router. And all of us who are working on it are like, we all use React. React is still like 3 times as widely used as all the rest of them combined. Like there's very obvious reasons to start with React. However, there are good reasons to use other UI libraries too. And so after building Remix and getting that on a stable 1.0, the Remix team started working on support or making a framework agnostic router. And that is now React Router 6.4 is built on top of the Remix router. And Remix router is framework agnostic. And so there are already implementations of Remix router in Vue and Angular and Svelte and Preact and Solid, I think. And so now what's happening is the Remix team is bringing the latest version of Remix Router into Remix itself, so that they can delete a lot of code in Remix. And then once that is finished, they're also working on some way to customize the compiler or bring your own compiler. And when both of those things are finished, then it will be definitely a thing that people do, is to use Remix with any UI library that they like. And the other thing that I'll say about this is that if you are one of those people who are like, I don't like React for X, Y, and Z, I would still recommend that you give Remix a look, because Remix actually eliminates a lot of the problems with React, just in the way that it works. So for me, when I'm using Remix and building pages and stuff, I feel like React is just a template library. I don't really feel burdened by some of the shortcomings that React does have. So I would still recommend giving it a look. But if you're really like, I just want to use a different UI library, that will come eventually.
Yeah, why asking this question? Because maybe you know that web components become more and more popular, and there is like Stencil.js, Svelte, and maybe some other frameworks or libraries. So yeah, that's probably the main reason. Okay, thank you. I would suggest to jump into Discord voice channel and the discussion there, and I will give to our organizer the final word or words about the conference. So see you in the Discord voice channel.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been awesome, and I'll see you in Discord.